Jesus is looking at his disciples. He is looking at us. He is speaking to his disciples. He is speaking to us. I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. The vine, ancient symbol of luscious growth, reaching out across the land, cared for, protected by watchtowers and a strong wall, the vine. A network of many branches, some weak, some strong, some new, some that are old and deeply rooted in soil, but all connected to one source of life, and all bearing a harvest of great beauty and joy. Says Jesus, I am the vine. You are the branches. If a man remains in me and I in him, he will bear much fruit. Then this, apart from me, you can do nothing. It is one thing to behold the rich beauty of the vine and to believe that it is good, but the call of Jesus runs much deeper than that. For we are invited not just to admire the way of Christ from the outside, but to allow ourselves to be grafted into the way of Christ. In other words, our faith in Jesus leads us to spend the whole of our lives with him, moment by moment, whether in church, the garden, the kitchen, at work, beside quiet waters on bright sunny days, and when the wind blows sharp and drives the rain into our faces. I'm not speaking of a striving to reach levels of super spiritual piety. That is at odds with our down-to-earth Yorkshire character, and would probably run the risk of being fake anyway. But just a normal, step by humble step life in the way of the Master, the way of the Good Shepherd, the way of Jesus. Allow me to transport you for a moment to a monastic community in mid-17th century Paris. Not to the chapel, where doubtless the heavenly strains of Gregorian chant are ascending, but no, I want you to imagine that we are standing in the middle of the busy kitchen. Clattering, steaming, chopping, boiling of fatty meat and veg with all the bustle and flap to get everything ready for presentation to the refectory and the abbot sitting on the high table. And in the midst of it all, you might notice a rather large and ham-fisted, laid, gentle giant of a brother who looks every inch as though he's been through the wars, which indeed He has, for before he was called to the cloister, he was a foot soldier in the armies of France. His name is Lawrence, Brother Lawrence. And we've come to know him through a small collection of surviving letters and recorded conversations, which you can find in this beautiful small book called The Practice of the Presence of God. In one of his letters, this humble Christian man wrote of how even if all he is doing is washing pans or turning an omelette, he finds delight in the presence of God with him. These are his words. I do nothing but abide in his presence. And I do this by a simple attentiveness and a habitual loving turning of my eyes on him. This I should call the actual presence of God. And this, my commonest attitude, is this simple attentiveness, a habitual loving turning of my eyes to God, to whom I often find myself bound with more happiness and gratification than that which a babe enjoys clinging to its nurse's breast. When I first read Brother Lawrence's words, I felt something of a failure. How could I ever aspire to live such a spiritual life? But thinking more deeply, I can see that he is quite simply reflecting the words of Jesus. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. Brother Lawrence was not a sophisticated, highly intelligent, way above the common man theologian. He worked in a kitchen. But one thing he did was to develop the habit of attentiveness to God through the whole of his day. Was this a burden to him? Absolutely not. For he found overwhelming joy in his relationship with God, his conversation with God. And what was true for Brother Lawrence, and for that matter, many other Christians down the years, can be true for us all. Allow me to make one practical suggestion, and that is to encourage you to find and protect a quiet space, be it 10 minutes or a whole hour, but time and space each and every day that is your precious time with God. It is, of course, up to you how you might structure this time, but do include some reading and praying through a psalm, plus another passage from the Bible, maybe two, Old Testament, New Testament, and then simply prayer. And I recommend that an important part of your discipline of prayer should be silence. Silence that allows space for you to hear in your very soul what God may be saying, not only to you, but in you. From Psalm 46. be still and know that I am God. When I was 17, God used a wise older Christian to put into my head that if the Christian gospel is true, if Jesus really did rise from the dead, if he really is alive in the world, then how could there possibly be anything more important than to know him and to have him in my life? I became a Christian believer there and then, February 1972. But it's only been over the course of all the intervening years that I have even begun to learn what it is to translate my belief into being a disciple. I am still learning now. St. Paul writes, I want to know Christ and the power of his resurrection, and the fellowship of sharing in his sufferings, becoming like him in his death, and so somehow to attain the resurrection from the dead. To follow Jesus, to learn from him, to become like him, to bear fruit for him. This is not dull, boring, pious monotony. Quite the opposite. It is a way of life that is joyful, life-enhancing, and life-giving. Back to the upper room. That Maundy Thursday evening. We watch and we listen, and as soon as Judas had taken the bread, he went out, and it was night. Snap! He's broken away, fallen away from the vine. Other voices have captured his heart with 30 pieces of silver, and he has shriveled up and died inside. I think there is silence for a few moments. I think it is with a heavy heart and sad eyes that Jesus says to the remaining 11 and to us, remain in me, and I will remain in you. My dearly beloved brothers and sisters, this is God's will for us. Yes, it is always going to be work in progress. Boy, I'm work in progress. Yes, we will all stumble, and from time to time, yes, sometimes we might even feel like giving up altogether. But when distractions, disappointments, temptations, and stresses come along, then it is good just to know deep within ourselves that just as we do our best to hold on to him, so also faithfully he is holding on to us. For there is nothing nothing in all creation that can separate us from God's love, which he has shown to us so abundantly in his Son, Jesus, the one who calls to us today from the upper room and from the cross, and again says to us today, remain in me, and I will remain in you.